Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to completely demystify a pretty fascinating psychological framework called internal family systems, or IFS. Over the next few minutes, we're going to transform that chaotic jumble of inner voices in your head into a crystal clear, structured roadmap for emotional healing. So, let's jump right in. Have you ever felt totally torn between two choices, or acted in a way that just completely baffles you? Like, why on earth do we impulsively binge an entire season of reality TV just to avoid sending one single, moderately stressful email? We really like to think we have one unified mind, but our contradictory actions honestly tell a very different story. So, here's our agenda to figure out why. First, we'll cover the multiplicity of mind. Second, managers and firefighters. Third, understanding your exiles. Fourth, the core self. And fifth, unblending and unburdening. All right, Section 1, the multiplicity of mind and normalizing our inner voices.
So the foundational concept here, which was developed by Dr. Richard Schwartz, is that the human mind is naturally multiple. It's basically a mosaic. It's made up of interacting subpersonalities called parts, and each of these has its own feelings, motives, and jobs, all guided by a central core known as the self. Seriously, you aren't crazy for having conflicting thoughts. Your mind is literally designed as an internal system of different parts.
Moving to Section 2, managers and firefighters. Let's meet the protectors. Now, these protectors have one singular, very noble mission: to keep you safe from emotional pain. But they fall into two totally different camps. Managers act kind of like an overzealous life coach. They're proactive, trying to control and plan absolutely everything to prevent harm before it even happens. Firefighters, on the other hand, act way more like a reactive bouncer. They jump in to numb you and soothe distress only after you've already been triggered. Managers honestly believe that if everything is perfect, you just won't get hurt. They force us to overwork, obsess over tiny details, or constantly scan for risks. For instance, a perfectionist manager might pressure you to proofread a simple 2-sentence email like 5 times, just to avoid any hint of failure or criticism. Sure, they keep things orderly, but their need for absolute control leaves you totally exhausted. But when those manager strategies eventually fail and emotional pain flares up, the firefighters swoop in to douse the flames. Their tactics are super impulsive and designed strictly for immediate relief. This is the part of you that suddenly chooses to numb out with a pint of ice cream, binge-watch TV, or maybe just lash out in anger to relieve tension. They want a fast escape route, and while it works in the moment, it definitely derails your long-term goals. Which brings us to Section 3, understanding your exiles and the wounded inner child. Because what exactly are these protectors guarding so fiercely? Well, they're guarding the exiles. These are the vulnerable parts of you that carry the heavy emotional baggage of the past. Stuff like unresolved pain, shame, neglect, or fear. They're often frozen in time, almost like an inner child reliving a past trauma on a loop. Your protectors literally exile these parts from your conscious mind because their distress feels way too intense for your everyday system to handle. And that brings us to a foundational mantra of this entire framework. All parts are welcome. Listen, no matter how extreme a manager's perfectionism is or how destructive a firefighter's impulsive behavior might seem, every single part actually has a positive intention. They're all just trying to keep those vulnerable exiles safe. They absolutely deserve our empathy rather than our judgment. All right, Section 4, the core self, your inner team captain. So the self isn't actually a part at all. It's the true spiritual essence of who you are when you're unencumbered by trauma and burdens. The 8 C's of self-leadership beautifully map out this core essence, and by rating yourself from 0 to 5 on these qualities, you can actually recognize how much of your true self is available to you at any given moment. When your self is in the driver's seat, you approach your internal world with genuine curiosity, a really non-judgmental wonder about why a part is acting the way it is. You bring open-hearted compassion, calmness, and confidence. And here is the real magic of IFS. When your self leads with these specific qualities, those exhausted protective parts finally feel safe enough to just relax and step back. Now for Section 5, unblending and unburdening. This is the path to healing. To understand unblending, we obviously have to talk about blending first. Blending happens when a part's intense emotions completely take the wheel. When you're blended, you don't just notice an emotion, you literally become it. It's like getting swallowed whole by a sudden wave of anger or anxiety. You lose access to that calm, curious core self we just talked about, and suddenly it feels like you're starring in an emotional soap opera you definitely never auditioned for.
So shifting our language is the very first crucial tool to unblend. Instead of saying, I am angry, you simply say, a part of me is angry. Just that tiny linguistic shift creates some really necessary space between your observing self and the activated part. It reminds you that you are so much more than just this single overwhelming emotion.
Here is how you actually do it in practice. First, pause and acknowledge the emotion. Second, locate it in your body. Maybe it's a tight chest or a knot in your stomach. Third, speak to that part with genuine curiosity. Ask it what it needs. And finally, reassure the part, thank it for its protection, and gently ask it to step back. You're approaching it like a concerned friend rather than an enemy you're just trying to banish. Now, once you're unblended and those protectors trust you, yourself can safely reach the exile to begin unburdening. And unburdening is where the deep healing happens. You check if the exile is ready. Then, you visualize literally removing the heavy burden. It's like taking off a 20-pound emotional backpack it's been carrying around for decades. You offer the part new qualities like hope and joy, and finally, reintegrate this newly freed inner child back into your system.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a provocative thought to take into your day. The next time you feel completely overwhelmed, triggered, or you catch yourself reaching for that impulsive distraction, just pause. Ask yourself, which part of me needs a little compassion today? Invite yourself to lead your internal family with curiosity instead of criticism. You might just be amazed at the harmony you find inside.